Hi, volunteers! We are so excited to talk about TC Sound projects today. So I'm Caitlin. I'm the Transcription Center Coordinator for those of you who do not know me. And today I just sort of wanted to sit down with you guys and talk about how TC Sound works, what kinds of projects we've launched so far, what we're going to launch, and why volunteer transcription of TC Sound projects is so important to accessibility and preservation of audiovisual collections. So we do have a team member here off camera helping us to field questions, so please feel free to tweet at us, post in the discussion of this Facebook event, or email us at transcribe@si.edu. If you post in on Twitter with any comments or questions, please use the hashtag TCSound, and we will try and get to your questions in this discussion and or answer them afterwards. When we're done with this video today at 1:20, we're also going to upload it to YouTube, and then we'll also post the question and answers to the YouTube channel video and here on the event page so that everyone can come back to it and sort of review things as well. I also just wanted to quickly apologize for our technical difficulties yesterday. Sorry, we had some Wi-Fi problems and some issues with screen sharing. So we're not going to try that today. We're just going to sort of go over things. So I'm going to dive right in. So I wanted to start with kind of an overview of why we launched TC Sound. So we did officially launch TC Sound on Monday. I hope you all saw that. And that means that we are working with different units around the institution to put up digitized audio recordings, of which we have more than 150,000 in our holdings, but only some of those are digitized, and we're working on digitizing more every day. And we created a new platform on Transcription Center so that we could transcribe these recordings and play them and then caption them and make them more accessible. So this is a really big deal. Audio visual recordings are harder to access, especially for those hard of hearing. We often don't know what's in them because we don't have the resources or the time to listen to every recording or watch every video. And so volunteer help is really going to help us make these more accessible for researchers around the world and help us advocate for the preservation of these collections. So stay tuned for more projects coming. We have 14 right now from 5 different units around the institution. If you just go to transcription.si.edu/audio collections, you can find those projects listed. I also put that link in the discussion of this event page, so you can go there. On that page, you'll also find a link to the instructions for transcribing sound and a blog post that talks further about the launch of the projects, why it's important, audiovisual preservation around the institution, etc. Oh, and another super exciting thing, keep an eye out. We're going to keep updating you about this, but our goal, if everything goes well, is that we are going to be launching video and film transcription in the fall. I'm very excited about this. We're very excited about it. We have over 290,000 audiovisual collections across the institution. And so keep an eye out for moving image media, which is film and video in the future. So let's start with a couple of sort of big volunteer questions that we have been getting this past week.
Yes, you mentioned it a little bit, Caitlin, but what's the best way to get started if you were interested in starting with this transcription?
Yes, absolutely. So how do you find TC Sound projects? So as I said, go to transcription.si.edu/audio collections, and that will give you a direct list of all of the ongoing projects that need transcription. That's also linked in the Facebook event, as I said. So you can find all of the projects that are ongoing. You can also find further information and instructions. So that's sort of the best way to dive in. There's also a big link to the projects on our main homepage in the marquee. And you can also search on Twitter and Instagram for the hashtag TC Sound to find out more about the projects and audiovisual collections in general, which we'll be talking about for the next 2 weeks.
So thank you so much. That's really great. So what about in our other typical transcriptions, you would transcribe pages, but the way these audio transcription projects are broken up are with timestamps. How do those work?
Yes, so timestamps can be very confusing, and we very much acknowledge that. So in audio projects, one of the necessary steps when you're transcribing the content that you're hearing when you're listening to the audio recordings is to manually insert timestamps. And what this means is that we've created keyboard shortcuts that are at the top of every audio project page, and you can insert timestamps with the keyboard shortcut Control-I, and that inserts the timestamp, and that literally just marks the place in the recording where the sound or the word that you're hearing happens. So they're really, really, really important, because what timestamps do is they line up the actual audio recording with the synchronized captions that you guys are creating through transcription. So this means that when anyone is interacting with the audio recording and they play it, as they're playing it and they're hearing those words, the actual transcribed captions of those words are going to go alongside it in the exact place that it comes up. We thought about making these automatic, but unfortunately, we couldn't figure out a way to make this happen, because if we made them automatic, it wouldn't allow for us as Smithsonian staff to work with you guys as volunteers to collaboratively transcribe these collections. Because as we edit, it would change and mess up the timestamps. So we are asking you guys to manually insert those, and this can get a little bit tricky, but I promise as you kind of dive into projects and you work on them more and more often, you'll get used to them, and it'll become clearer. Also, when you go to transcription.si.edu/audio collections and you go to that instructions page, which is at the top of that page, you can link to it. We have a video tutorial on inserting timestamps that sort of shows you what it looks like without timestamps, and then shows you what it looks like with timestamps to help you sort of see how inserting timestamps works and how it helps to make these transcriptions and these audio recordings even more accessible.
Awesome. How do we know who's speaking? Is it always going to say that in the description of each project?
Yeah, so that is also kind of tricky. So for projects that we know a lot about, or are labeled in their finding aid or their catalog record by the unit who holds that recording, we will often list out the speakers. So again, you'll see on each project page, you'll have a list of keyboard shortcuts on the left side of the screen. And then you'll also have speaker names. So it might say speaker 1, Caitlin Haynes, speaker 2, John Smith, and it'll tell you how to insert those with keyboard shortcuts. Control-1 and Control-2 is usually what the keyboard shortcuts are for speaker names. But again, how do you know what Caitlin Haynes' voice sounds like and what John Smith's voice sounds like? Or is there somebody else speaking that isn't labeled? And that can be tricky. The thing that we sort of recommend for identifying who's speaking is to listen to all of the segments in a project and see if they identify each other. That can be useful. Reviewing what other volunteers have done and see if they've been able to identify the speakers and go from there. Or reach out to us through email, through the notes section of each project page, or through social media, and see if we can work with the units to help you identify who's speaking. Sometimes, though, we're not going to know who's speaking. Some projects won't have speaker tags associated with them because we don't know. Or sometimes they will, but other people will come into a conversation and the unit has no idea that they're in that recording. That happens a lot. And in those instances, it's always fine to write speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker unknown. That's completely fine. Just make sure you tag it with those curly brackets. And again, examples of this are in those instruction pages on the TC Sound page.
Awesome. And we did get another question for our team. So transcribing, we get that pretty easy. But what about the review process? What does that look like with audio projects?
Yeah, so it is the same as transcribing textual projects where any volunteer can come in and transcribe a segment or a page. Or they can just do part of it, save it, but then when an entire segment or entire page is transcribed, then they can hit complete and mark for review. And then another volunteer can come in and review it. I always recommend, and again, we go over this and have examples of this in the instructions page, but I always recommend not trying to review the actual transcription first, but instead playing the audio segment in the player on that page. And reading the captions as you listen to it. And then that way identifying, are there any words that are missed as you're listening and reading together? Are there any typos? Are there timestamps that need to be inserted? You'll know this because there'll be a huge block of text that's blocking everything. So maybe you need to insert timestamps. So I recommend listening to the entire segment and reading the captions as you go along. And then if there are any issues, you can reopen that segment for editing and then go back through and insert tags and timestamps and correct words as needed. So this is always something that gets easier as you go along, and you can always reach out to us and your fellow volunteers on email, through the notes page, or through social media.
So once our volunteers have put in all this work, what happens when all these projects are completed? What are the units going to do with these completed transcriptions?
Yes. So as you'll see on each project, and this is similar to the textual projects as well that we're used to, one diary or one audio recording are split into different manageable segments. But when it's all complete, it goes back into one thing. So yes, the recordings are split into different segments, but when it's all done, it'll stay in those completed segments, but then at the top of each project page, you'll get a little section that'll say view and play. And when you click on that, it'll open a player with the entire recording from start to finish of all the segments stitched back together. And you'll be able to play that audio recording, listen to it from start to finish, and then watch the captions and read along with it as they've been transcribed. So that's really awesome. You'll also be able to, or any researcher around the world will also be able to click at the top of the completed project page and download a finished PDF that will include all of the transcribed text, along with citation information and contact information for the unit that it came from. Also, as we know from textual projects, completed transcriptions means text searchable keywords from every part of that collection, which is really freaking amazing, and means that our collections are now searchable and findable and discoverable in new ways that they weren't before transcription. So when you go into Collections Search Center, which is just collections.si.edu, which is the Smithsonian's online database for all of our museum, library, and archival content, and you search for a keyword or a phrase or a person, if it has been transcribed, then not only will you find the catalog record of the collection related to that, but it'll show you actual thumbnails in the Transcription Center of where that phrase or that person is identified. That same thing will happen with audio recordings. So that's really excellent. And in those catalog records where it finds that information, you'll also get a little tab on the left that says Transcription, which will lead you back to the Transcription Center where you can view and play that entire audio recording with the synchronized captions. We have not added screenshots and examples of that to Transcription Center yet, but we will be doing that in the next week, so that people can actually see what this is all going to look like. So every single word transcribed by the volunteers makes a huge difference in accessibility and findability of these materials.
You mentioned this at the beginning, but for those just tuning in, what's next? What do we look forward to next?
Yeah, so we have a lot of amazing projects ongoing currently from the National Air and Space Museum Archives, from Smithsonian Institution Archives, from the National Anthropological Archives and Human Studies Film Archives, from Anacostia Museum Archives. So there's some really, really cool oral histories, interviews with artists from Archives of American Art. We're going to keep getting more and more of those projects. So more interviews and oral histories from Archives of American Art, more oral histories from Air and Space Museum Archives, but we're also going to be getting some more content on film travel lectures from the National Anthropological Archives, and we'll be talking to their staff about that next week, which is really exciting. So keep watching our Facebook Live events. We're going to be getting some more radio programs and other oral histories from Smithsonian Institution Archives, which is pretty exciting, and we're going to be talking to them about AV preservation this week and next week, so watch Facebook Live and our YouTube channel for those videos. And then next week, we're also going to be launching some recordings, lectures, and events that were recorded in the 1981 Folklife Festival, which is really exciting, related to deaf folklore and deaf culture. So we're making accessibility history accessible in a very meta, exciting way. And then one of the projects that we are most excited about, and we know others are most excited about, are in July for the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. We will be launching press conferences and shuttle recordings related to the Apollo 11 launch. So keep an eye out for those as we can continue over the next 2 weeks. doing a bunch of outreach and sharing information about the TC Sound campaign. We are going to be posting more information about these collections, background information on the people and stories within all of these recordings, as well as further information on audiovisual collections and staff around the Smithsonian and what we're doing to preserve these materials and why they're so different and unique and why they need different kinds of preservation work on them.
So those are the main questions that we've been getting, but if folks have any more questions, are there any hashtags we should be using to ask them and communicate with each other?
Yeah, so follow and post using hashtag TC Sound or hashtag We Listen Together or both when you are asking questions or sharing content about TC Sound projects. We're learning just as much from you guys, and we're excited to learn more about all of these collections as we dive into them and listen further together as volunteers and Smithsonian staff around the institution. We know that none of this work would ever be possible without the hard work of volunteers. So we're really excited about all of your continued collaboration and hard work on these projects. So if you come up with any sort of tips or tricks for transcribing, that you find a way to do this easily, we have a lot of tutorials on the instructions page and a lot of examples for how we think it's easy to transcribe, but that might not necessarily be the best way to do it. So if you find another way to transcribe or review these recordings that you think is easier, please share that with us and your fellow volunteers. We will definitely feature your tips and tricks because we want to know how to do it better too. So we are constantly editing our instructions and editing our projects and building these platforms alongside you guys. So please keep us updated. Great. Okay. All right, guys, I think that's going to be it for today, but we're going to keep this discussion going on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on our website. So please check back in about projects, invite your friends to participate, and share any information or questions you have. Okay, thanks. We can't wait to see what else we uncover as we listen together.